Hi friends, Mindy here. I have a process video for you today. I'm going to be setting up a little journal to work through Junk Journal July, which is hosted by Meg Journals. I will link her information down below. I have this little book which I created as part of an altered book series on my channel several months ago, and I was doing kind of two books at the same time. I ended up using the other book, and this book has just been sitting in my stash since then. And so I thought this would be the perfect time to kind of use it, pull it out and use it. And so I'm going to make this into a little junk journal. I've already counted to make sure I had enough pages for a page for every day in July. I have a couple extra pages, which is good. You never know what's going to happen. And I just felt like the size would be really good. It's nice and it's not too big, so it shouldn't, take more than a few minutes every day to work through the prompts for Junk Journal July. So what I'm doing here is I'm going to cover this with some gesso. I started out with some Dina Wakley gesso, but it was really just too thick. And so I switched to my gesso wash that I just keep in my little jar there. And it just made it go much easier because it was just more liquidy. I just want to kind of knock back some of this green. It's not going to get rid of it altogether, which is fine. I just kind of want to knock back the intensity of it just a little bit, and then also kind of prepare this surface for the next step. And this gesso will just make that just a little bit easier. So going through and just adding into the spine, into the little kind of divot there on the edge, just making sure everything has a decent coat. Like I said, it's not going to completely cover this. I'd have to do more than one layer in order for that to work. So I'm just adding some gesso, not being too precious about it at all. And again, this is actually a wash of gesso. I just keep when my bottle of gesso gets down near the bottom, it gets hard to get out of the jar. I just add some water, and then I don't have to make a wash every time I want one. So it's just something that I just keep on hand. So I'm going to go ahead and go through here now, and I'm actually going to switch now to my Dina Wakley gesso, which is just a little bit thicker, and I'm going to go through and gesso these pages. I'm not doing the entire page. I'm not even making sure that it's completely white or anything. There is a very faint like pinstripe in these pages, which is actually kind of neat. So I don't want to knock everything back. I just want to kind of, dull the intensity of the typewriting, the script on here, because I don't really know how I'm going to be working through these pages. I may end up coming in and adding paper. I don't know. It'll just be whatever the prompts are and wherever that process takes me. So, but I did want to just kind of get rid of some of the intensity of the writing in this book. So I'm just going to go through here and add gesso. I'm not even drying it between. I'm just going through, and then when I got to the end, I had a little bit of gesso left on my little acrylic block that I was using as a palette, and I just added some water and just kind of smushed the little bit, mostly because I just didn't want it to go to waste. So you can see I tore those two pages apart. They were kind of sticking together. That's not going to be a problem. I can cover that up when I get to those pages. Really just wanted to get some gesso down. So now what I want to do is kind of cover with this tissue paper. This is not a super thin tissue. I know some like that you can get for gift wrapping and stuff can be really super thin. This is, it's thin, it's still tissue paper, but it has a pretty good feel to it. So I'm going to be able to actually cover this book with this. And I am going to use matte gel medium. This is a Liquitex brand. It's just going to, you could use collage medium, you could use some different things, but I just felt like with the texture of the cover, because it was a fabric cover, it wasn't painted, it was like a canvas kind of feel. I just felt like the matte gel would do better in holding down this tissue. So I'm just taking a palette knife and kind of smoothing on a pretty hefty coat, just making sure I'm getting it everywhere and even down into that little groove there on the cover. and just kind of smoothing it out. And then I'm going to add my tissue over the top. And then you know, it's kind of wrinkled. It's been just, you know, in my stash, and I want the wrinkles, and I even kind of, you know, scrunched it up just a little bit so that there would be some texture there as well. And then I'm going to go back over the top of that to kind of seal it down again with another layer of matte gel medium. So I'm just doing this. You could do this with a paintbrush. You could do this with a palette knife like I'm doing. You could do it with a credit card. I just felt like the palette knife was going to do what I needed it to do. I was trying to make sure I wasn't going to tear the tissue and everything. And sometimes when you're, you know, using a paintbrush, it's harder to tell like how much pressure you're putting on there. So I wanted to just go ahead and use the palette knife, but you could do it however. And I went through and then just dried that. It's not completely dry, but for the most part. And now I'm trying to decide if I want to like wrap the cover. I thought about just tearing it, but I decided to just go ahead and wrap it. So I'm trimming this down just like I would with any other book that I've covered. If you've watched any of my videos on my channel and seen me cover journals or whatever, it's going to be that same process. I'm just doing it with tissue and gel medium. So I trimmed the excess off of there, and then I'm going to go ahead and now I'm going to flip this to the spine. I'm adding the gel medium. I'm going to work on the spine section, and then I'm going to flip it to the back and do the same thing to the back cover. And then I'm going to trim everything down. I lost some footage here. I actually wrapped it just like I've done on other videos, and then I actually added in some paper. This was actually some By the Well for God paper that was left over from my last kit, and it fit almost perfectly. I only had to trim it down just a little bit to be my end papers, just to kind of cover where I wrapped that tissue around. And when I wrapped it around, I just used gel medium, and it was fine. So I have some coffee here in this little spray bottle, and I'm just going to now kind of coffee dye these pages just to give them a little bit of color. I'm going through here and drying it, and because these pages aren't like completely gessoed, each page is going to kind of take that coffee dye just a little bit different. You can kind of see here toward the center where there wasn't as much gesso, it soaked up the coffee a little bit more. So it just kind of gave a really interesting effect on the pages. I just went through and sprayed each page, and then I dried everything. And now I have these Tim Holtz journaling cards I want to use to kind of create a little collage here on my cover. I ended up settling on this one with this lady, and I loved that it had kind of a calendar on there because, again, this is going to be for Junk Journal July. I also liked this one because some of the colors were similar. And so at this point I thought what I need to do now is distress the cover so that I can get a good feel for how those cards are actually going to look on there. So I'm going to go around the edge of this journal with some archival ink and ground espresso. I'm using archival because I want it to be permanent. And so I'm just going through with my little sponge dauber and just distressing mostly around the edges, doing the corners a little bit darker, just really trying to age this journal. And went down the spine. You can still see some of the letters. That's not going to be a problem. And then on the front, you can still see some of the letters, which is why I'm going to create this collage right here using this journaling card. So I have pulled out a few things from my stash to create a little collage cluster here. I have some book text here that I'm going to kind of tuck behind there. I also have these little tickets that I made. I have a video for that. I'll try to link that below as well. And I just made those with some Tim Holtz stamps and some vintage book page. And then this is a Tim Holtz little flash card. And I just like that it said junk on it, since this is going to be, I had considered writing out the whole thing Junk Journal July on the front, but I just thought this was funny. So I just left it to just saying junk. And then you can see I'm tucking some of those other little pieces that I created just kind of around. This one was just a little bit too big for the space that I had, so I went with one that was just a little bit more narrow. I'm just kind of getting an idea for where everything's going to go, just rehearsing it just a little bit. And when I get it to about where I want it, I'm going to kind of pull everything back off, and I'm going to distress each piece. I've already distressed the flash card that says junk, but I want to now kind of distress all of the bits and pieces. So I went through and just kind of laid everything out, and now using that same ground espresso, I'm going to go through and distress each individual piece, and now I'm going to glue them down. I'm using a Yoo-Hoo glue stick, and I'm starting from the back and working my way forward. So these pages that are super, super thin, because this is vintage paper, so it's really old and it's really thin. I'm using that Yoo-Hoo glue stick. It's just going to give me the best result there without bubbling or warping or anything. So I'm doing that with the book text and then these little tags that I created, because they're actually created out of vintage books as well. So I'm just kind of placing everything where I think I'm going to want it to go. And then for these pieces that are kind of old, I'm using my Yoo-Hoo glue stick, and then but for the flash card that says junk and the actual journaling card itself, I'm going to switch to my Barely Arts precision glue, just because it's a little bit heavy duty, and so I feel like it's going to hold everything well. So I'm just putting this little acrylic block on here just to hold it, and then this is basically what it's going to look like. You can see when I open this up, I realized I needed to distress these end papers as well. These again are those ones that I got from my By the Well for God kit, and this pretty much wraps it up. So if you like this video, I would appreciate it if you gave it a thumbs up. Subscribe to my channel if you haven't already, and until next time, bye.